Hello and welcome to the Low Code Cafe. This is episode number 188 for Wednesday, July 30, 2025. Today's main topic is low code, high performance. We'll be getting into workflow performance and stress testing in Plantain app and demonstrating how you can have some strategies to optimize your forms and workflows. So, end result will be improving the performance of low code. We'll also be talking some about hot fixes and things like that. So, let me introduce myself. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantain App, and this is an event that we do every month. It's Wednesday, always done on a Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time, but it's an opportunity for us to do updates and demos, and we spend the most of our time on hands-on low coding. We record all of these and put them on our YouTube channel on the Low Code Cafe playlist. And so, yeah, we've got a ton of these out there already. You can use the QR code that's there to get to that, but it's youtube.com/plantainapp, and you can subscribe and get alerted when we get new content posted, which is usually the day after we do a live webinar. I am going to be doing a little from the trenches segment, telling you some about our current product and some things from support, but then we'll spend most of our time on hands-on low coding. Please do engage with us. I've got the chat window open and the Q&A window open. You can raise your hand as well, but at the end of it, we have a link to our feedback form. You can give us feedback on what you thought about today's episode or things that you'd like to see in the future. Low Code Cafe is scheduled to be on the last Wednesday of every month. I apologize. I had a little bit of confusion on the scheduling for that, so some of you might have gotten a notice for last Wednesday, but you didn't miss a thing. It's today, and then we'll do it again August 27th. So jumping on to from the trenches of support. We'll have some stuff with, let's talk about hot fixes. In 126, 126 is our stable version that's been around since June of 2024, and we'll have support through the end of this year. And then 127 was just released a month ago, and so we'll talk about that in a second. On 126, there's been a number of hot fixes. I have a system that I update as we do these cafes, and there's a number of these recent hot fixes, and I'll highlight a few. But take a look at your updates hot fixes tab, and you'll see what's available to you. With our app builder, there's been support for the newer version of Razor web pages. That's experimental, but there's a whole documentation topic about it. So that's a newer dialect of Razor and a great way to extend your low code. We have some minor fixes for some bugs that some people had uh, encountered, so you can go ahead and install those hotfixes as well. Um, I'll touch on forms and listings as well. We, for those of you who use dynamic fields, there was some ability to enable conditionally. We have a new action, the pick item from listing, which is a nice way that when you're working with a form and you want to be able to populate some data in a form, you can use pick item from listing action to open up a listing, select a row, and that populates fields back into your form. So it's a nice pattern, and I'm sure we'll show that off soon, but pretty straightforward to implement on listings. Again, the updates for that. So in general, I recommend that you click the um, select all button and install all hotfixes, say yes, always have a backup on hand before you install hotfixes. We work very hard to make sure we don't impact you, but there's always a chance that during an installation on any particular system that you could encounter an issue. So I'm going to just slide that off and we'll let that finish up on its own. On version 127, I don't have a demonstration to show you, but two things I wanted to mention. One is that we released a stack of hotfixes yesterday, and then since we've done that, we've found a known issue. If you happen to use the listing field cell condition, you're not going to want to install these updates on 127. So that would be in a listing, and if you open up any data field, there is this cell condition to determine whether or not you show a value in a particular cell. If you use this, it's not going to work right for you. So that would be a good reason to hold off on installing the hotfixes. If you don't, you're welcome to install it. But we have resolution planned for this week, maybe as soon as tomorrow. But otherwise, again, I would just click install all and install them. And yeah, that's that. Aside from that, we get together in the Low Code Campfire, and that's every Friday, this same hour, 10 a.m. Central Time. And so we can talk about any issues that you're facing. It's a more of a meeting format that's very give and take, come and go. So do sign up for that. The link to do that and other things is here. I'll put this on the chat. If I can find the key, there it is. So you can register in advance for those. You can get to our webinar recordings. You can go to our community portal, which is a great place to post questions that are for the community at large, or for trying to solicit others' experience and feedback. Or you can get to the last one, the one I mentioned a little while ago, the webinar feedback form. So with that, I'm going to move on to our hands-on low coding portion of the presentation today. So how to get high performance out of low code. There's a lot. This is a very big topic, and we're not going to get to all of it, but we're going to get to at least a key strategy, which is being able to measure performance and then be able to do optimization. And we'll look at one particular way to optimize, but there's certainly many ways to optimize. But measurement is kind of a nice first step. We're going to be focusing a lot on measuring workflows, and so it kind of brings up the topic workflows versus action stacks. If you have, and action stacks is kind of our informal term for if you have a form and a button and you have a big long stack of actions on the button, that's what we call an action stack. So if you have a form that has lots and lots of actions on it, oftentimes it's better, rather than doing the logic right there in your form or in your button, if you do it in a workflow, it becomes reusable. And I find it more maintainable as well, but it's a nice isolated way to have your logic, and then you can call it from your form. If you need to call it from other places like an API endpoint or an automation, it's there for that as well. But what we're going to be seeing today, that makes it very, as a workflow, it's very testable. When you're developing it in the first place, you can click the test button and get get output and make sure that discrete set of logic is doing what you expect, and then be able to include that in with confidence in your project. But we're going to be using the testable aspect as in running the same workflow many times and looking at it from a performance standpoint. So let's talk about so you can know right here at the outset what you're going to see if you hang around for the full hour. I have already done this work on the low code, the Campfire website, and that's the shared website. If you participate in Low Code Campfire, you get access to all this. So You'll be able to find and see exactly how all this works there, but we'll do it from scratch today as well, so you can see all the steps. But what we'll have is a testing form that you can choose a workflow, and I've got some workflows that all say stress test. And so, for example, if I have a workflow that called stress test user list via SQL, and if I want to run that 50 times or 500 times, let's say, and I'm going to leave a note, live demo, that when I click that, it submits 500. Oops, I need to open the place where I can look at this progress. And it already finished. So it did that particular thing in 3 seconds. Let's do it again, and we'll do 1,000 of them. And so we'll do that stress test again. And so we see 1,000, and then we'll see how many it finishes. So as this listing automatically refreshes, you can see it's progressing, and then it finished in a total duration of 9 seconds. So this kind of stress test thing is showing us how long it takes to do 1,000 iterations or 10 or whatever quantity that you want to test of a workflow. It also demonstrates that the workflow finished 1,000 times. If there were errors in the workflow and this count didn't equal the number that you requested, then that's a clue that you have errors in your workflow. And like I say, you get the total duration, so that gives a clue that if you try some performance enhancements, that you can see that they had hopefully a positive, but whatever effect that they have, you can see that. I guess right here at the outset, I'm going to also show that in the in the record, I have a large details of this of what was recorded, and what I've recorded in the large details is a list of the iteration number. So those 1,000 from 1 all the way to 1,000. But I just want to point out, and I'll touch on this again. They don't necessarily happen in order. So one finished first, and then the fourth iteration, and then the fifth and the 12th. So we're going to be using a concept called execute actions asynchronous, which submits where we're submitting 1,000 things to get done. And it's a good thing to know that asynchronous actions, there's no time guarantee that number one is going to finish before number two or number three. But if it's truly asynchronous, then you can take advantage of this asynchronous capability. So that's what we're going to get done. We have plus demonstrate that performance can be improved by taking advantage of features like caching. So it'll be selecting workflow, number of iterations, make a note, have it appear in a system debug entry, which system debug entry can be used for other things besides stress testing. I've designed it particularly to support stress testing, but we can use it for other things as well. So that's where we're going. I'm going to close that and get it out of my way here. We'll leave it around for a minute. So um, let's move on. We often start these out with kind of the foundational work, and so I'm going to do that first. It's not very exciting, but it is necessary. I've got a time difference utility token that we're going to import from and take a look at, and then we'll build the system debug entry entity and make a few changes to it to make it convenient for what we're trying to get accomplished. No questions so far. Okay. So let's do that. The time difference utility, again, I have all this implemented already in Campfire, so we can find it. It's a token, and It's down here in the utility namespace called time difference, and we could take a look. We can take a look at what it does here in a minute, but I'm just going to export it and bring it into um, our new project today. So I have a Cafe 2025. This is where we do all of our cafe work, so that we just kind of have a place for all of the things that we demonstrate on Low Code Cafe. And I'm going to go to the configuration page and import that token. Um, I there's lots of ways to do time difference. I chose to do a SQL query, so we'll see this. Uh, I'll show you how I built this token, but you can copy it or you can do it your own way. There's other ways, JavaScript, for example, but I like it. I happen to use SQL. So I'm going to import the token. We take a look at this token just to see what it says, and we can see it is a difference between two dates is my comment. It's done as a SQL database query where I'm taking two different dates in, and it's computing the number of seconds that are different between A and B. So that's all that's there. We can save and test that, and I'm interactively we could test this. It came up with value and value. If I put two dates in there, we'll test this in a little while, but if we put two dates in there, it'll tell us how many seconds. So that's the first thing that we need to get done. The next thing is the system debug entity. So I am going to take a look at, I'm going to open this in a new tab. Um, this system debug entity, I am going to export it, and you could do the same thing, copying it into your project. And we'll take a look at it. Oh, yeah, this is the one that I wanted to save on here. So I'm gonna open entities in a new tab on my Cafe 2025 system. Anyway, we will import the entity into here. So that's pasting that export and loading. And then we'll take a look at what's in it so that you can, if you want to build it yourself instead of enter it, you can do that as well. Um, so it has it's system debug entry, or entries is the plural. And I'm going to include this in the menu. I want to give this a different page. On this system, I have a page called entities, and I just don't want to clutter up my top level menu. So I'm going to put it under entities. For the properties, we have, in addition to the standard ones, we have the name of what we're doing, some details. The large details is a large text where, in this case, I'm going to store the iteration count, iteration properties, a start time and end time, the quantity that we queued, the quantity that got finished. So all the things that we've already seen. And so we'll save this with changes so that'll appear on our menu. Um, so if we preview the site, we now have system debug entries that's created standard create, read, update, delete logic. So we could add one for a test, which I'm actually going to do. I don't need any details. So we'll pick a start time. We'll do the 4th of July at noon, and the 4th of July at 12:05. And 0 and 0. So we have a nice test record here, and ideally we would like it to show the time difference between these two times. And so that's some of the changes that we're going to do next. So foundationally, we've done our utility token, we've got our debug entity, and then we want to do some some small things here. So we're going to show the large details only in detail view so they don't clutter things up. And then we're going to add a duration column with that time difference token. To do that, I am going to open the listing in a admin screen. And so this large details, I don't want to show on the primary views. I'm going to uncheck that. And I do want it to show on the detail view. And then we got to add a button to get it to show on the detail view. The easiest way to do that, there's this add special button that's inline details. And so it's going to have a details button, and we could build a custom detail view. That's what it suggests, but easier still is just adding a detail view action. And so it's going to show in the right sidebar, and I'll say it's the details. And with those few changes, now when we refresh, large details does not show here anymore. But if I click the details button, it shows off here in the right. And so it shows up here. And so this gives us the ability to have those large details, but not have them on the screen. Short details are going to show up over here in the name. So we've got the first two done, and then we want to have a time difference. So our time difference token that we had here is the thing. We haven't tested it yet, but we're going to test it right now. I'm going to add a column in our data that is a computed field, and we'll put the token in there. And then the fields that its start time and end time are the fields that we want to compare. So we'll do start time and end time token and save that. And actually, let's make it nice. We'll say this is duration in seconds as a title. So now we should have a duration, and it's correctly computed that 5 minutes is 300 seconds. So we've got our duration item working. Great. So we've done what we wanted to do for a foundation standpoint. We've got our time difference, our debug entity, and some nice little convenience things, so we can move on. I'm going to create another form on this page that's going to be about selecting a user, and we're going to use a SQL data source for a dropdown. And this is the thing that we're going to be improving the performance on if we can. I'm going to close down some stuff so we don't get confused about where we are. This is from Campfire, and then we have our, we'll just have start with one thing open here on our new site, on our 2025 site where we're building. So I am going to create a page to do all of our work today under the demo page. So we can go to configuration and add that. In our pages, we have the demo page. And I'm going to go into that and create a new page. And this is going to be called Low Code Performance. Cafe 188, something like that. Very more detailed than it needs to be, but there it is. Going to make it viewable by everyone, but only our developer roles will have the ability to change it. So this should give us a page to work on. And so we'll go back to the front of the site, and we now have this page. We can click into it. And this is where we'll be placing everything we're working on today. First thing we're going to do again is this form with a user dropdown. So we will go in and add a form to the page. This one always annoys me, so I'm going to delete it. This happens when we do a new page. By default, DNN adds a HTML module we don't need. So we'll add a form. It's a blank form, and I'll give it the name. Doesn't matter what we call it, but we'll just for clarity, it's the user selection form. And we're going to have a drop-down field, drop-down with autocomplete, where we have a list of users. We'll call it selected user. And by default, this data source is an item. We're going to change that to SQL in a minute, but let's take a look at what we have so far. So we have the selected user, and it has those first item, second item. We need some nice SQL to populate this. I've pre-done some SQL that will make sense here in a minute. We have an entity called people, and I've populated this with all the people that I want to include in it. So I have a name, an address, a title, and an ID. The ID is what we're going to want to capture, and I've got 96 records, so a little bit of data, not a ton. And so that's what we're going to want to populate in that list. I've already done a SQL query, a person query, which we can run. It's pulling out of that person table, and it's assembling the name of the person and their title together as the text. It's a field called text and returns a value. Our SQL mechanism in the dropdown responds very well to having a SQL select that has text and value, and that's why I set it up in this particular way. Whatever the SQL is for you doesn't really matter, but I'm going to use this query to populate our user dropdown. So let's get that done. So we have a selected user, and instead of using an item data source, and by the way, this is a bug we're working on fixing. We get a nice long drop down here. We're going to turn this into a SQL query and use that same query we've already tested. And by default, again, text is going to be what you see. Value is the value that's going to be selected, and or excuse me, that's going to be associated with it when the selection is made. So with that change, when I now refresh, we have our drop down and we can pick things. Good. So we have kind of we have the function, the basic functionality. So let's discuss a little bit. There's some burden. If every user that comes to this page, if you had a site that had 100 users and they're all going to this page, everybody who arrives at this page is going to all the things that are necessary to display your content um, is um, is going to be assembled when the page loads. And so that SQL query is going to be run once for every user that shows up. And so if you have 100 users going to the page, that query is going to be run 100 times. And so if that happens, this query is pretty lightweight, but other queries could be very heavy. And so this could be a performance problem, just building out that building the form. And so we want to make this query be as efficient as possible so that the page is as efficient as possible. And that's kind of the target of where we're going. See, there's a question, so I'm going to So yeah, there's a question about text and value versus using there's a couple of different ways to do this SQL query. If you do text and value columns in the query, it will automatically populate those. But alternatively, you could have used a query that creates a uh, that the result of the column, and I'm just going to type here, I'm not actually going to do it, but if it created output rows that looked like this, Dale with a pipe and then a three, then the first part, the first piece of it would be the text and the last piece would be the value. So you can either is perfectly acceptable, and we're actually going to take advantage of this today a little bit here in a minute. But yeah, it's interchangeable. It's not a replacement. Either way is fine. All right. So we've got a form, we've got a query, and we've discussed that we'd like to make this as efficient as possible. So let's see how to go about doing that. I'm going to create a workflow called stress test user list via SQL. And it's going to be that same list that we saw just a minute ago, but put in the form of a workflow. So we go back to our system and we create a workflow. And so new workflow, workflow name is stress test user list via SQL. And it's not going to have any inputs. We're just going to create the entire list. It's going to be using a load SQL create list from SQL action is what I'm going to use. So we're going to end up with a list. We're going to use this exact same query that we did earlier. So this gives us exact same result. And the list that we're going to create is the user list. I like to comment. So we get user list, so it's nice and clear. And then we want to do something with that. And so I am going to create um, first of all, I'm going to create an output token that's going to be called user CSV, and it's going to be empty. And then I'm going to loop through, and there's lots of ways to do this, right? I'm picking one way to do it, but I'm going to loop through the user list to create user CSV. That's what I intend to do with this action. So the list is user list. The action that I'm going to do is a create update token. And so we're going to set user CSV equal to the value of user CSV plus user list text with a pipe. This is the format that Jeff was asking about a minute ago. And then user list value. And I'm putting an enter key so that they each one appears on a new line. And so let's see what this gives us. If I go to our outputs and we're going to do output of user CSV that has the value of user CSV. See, now we can test this little thing and see if it works right. We run it and it's giving us the same content that we were seeing before, the name and title plus their user ID on the end of it. And so this ends up giving us the same, it's the same query that we're using on the um, form, but now it's in a nice, it's in a workflow that's very testable. We could run this 1 or 1,000 or 5,000 times and get the user list. So we can kind of see what the load is if we do this, and then see if there's any way to improve it. All right. So we've created we have a workflow. We can see what the output is going to be. And really, I'm going to just stop and say I've created a workflow that's very testable. It doesn't have any inputs, and we can run it as many times as we want. You can create it doesn't really matter what the workflow is for what we're about to do. You can test any workflow so long as it doesn't need any inputs, or you can set up defaults that it can run with the defaults, and so you can test it over and over again. That's what we're about to do. So let's start thinking about the stress test. We're going to have a form that runs our stress tests, and it's going to have those three things that we talked about earlier: the workflow, the quantity, and the note. And so let's, I'm just going to do it right here on this same page where we were building other things. So we'll have a new form that'll be our stress test form. Looking for my names again. It's the select a workflow, quantity to queue. Single choice drop. I'm going to pick drop down with autocomplete. Um, so that's we have to, let's configure that. There is um, a data source called workflows, and I'll talk about this one a little bit. We're about to fix it a little bit, but in 127, we can get the workflows automatically. Um, and yeah, let's take a look at that. Just that much here. So all of our workflows are showing up by name in this, and so we can pick our stress test for user via SQL, for example, if we want to do that. So that's what the workflow um, data source does for us. And so we'll continue working on our stress test. We need the quantity to queue. And so that's going to be a number field. And maybe we default it to 10. It doesn't really matter. Um, and then we also want a note field. There we go. And that's going to be empty. We'll have a button, and and this is a debugging technique that we're about to take a look at. So I do this all the time. It's a technique you should definitely learn. There's an action that says context to JSON object. It creates a token with everything. It's a nice way to look at um, all of your tokens. So I'm creating a token called tokens with everything in it, and I'm going to do a display error message. And with these two actions, we can see everything that's in the context and of a push of a button. So watch what happens. I refresh the page. I have a debug button. I'm going to pick my workflow and say that I want to do 100 times, and hi is my note. And I picked the wrong message here. But it does the same thing. Just I wanted to display error message, but we can now see the workflow selected was number 7. The quantity to queue was 100. We have a note of hi. All of your information is turned into JSON, so you can peek at all of the things that are available to you at that particular point in time. I'm going to fix this debug because it bothers me here. Should have been an error message, and that would keep from clearing the form. And Yeah, this will do a little bit better, I think, so we don't hide the fields when we're so we see it as an error message and it's on the screen. So in either case, we're displaying the tokens. That magic was done by the um, context to JSON object that stores everything into something called tokens. You can store it in anything that you want to. I happen to call it tokens. So a nice debugging technique. Anyway, let's not get too far afield. We've proven that we can get all of our information in and that we can select a workflow. There's a so now the um, when we get the workflow, it's currently returning an ID. In this case, workflow of 2 for the default demo context workflow. Um, we're going to be running workflows by way of a execute workflow action, which takes a workflow GUID. And so I'm going to show how to get to that. And it's a nice showing off of our SQL as well. Um, this is a list of tables that are in your database. There is this table called Plant and App Workflow fields. We don't recommend that you make changes to it, but you can use this feature to create a select out of it so we can peer into what it is. And I'm just going to manually test where ID equals 2. And we can see that, and actually let's get more useful here. Let's use our stress test one. That's number 7. Find it here. So let's look for number 7. And so now we see the ID. How can I scroll here? I picked the wrong one. So see, this is where Patrick would have stopped me. I want the workflows is not workflow fields. So this is going to give us a more sensical result. And I'm on the wrong site. Man, killing me, killing myself here. Too many forms open. All right, so we can see that workflow ID 7 is the stress test user list via SQL, and among other things, it has a global ID, and this is the thing that we're going to want. So we're going to we'll use a variation of this query to get that. And so we want the global ID where it's the workflow that we're talking about. So this is a quick and dirty way to get the ID. And so on our when we do stress test, we're going to use this to get the global ID. So we have our form, and let's dig in. The button we're going to do is a submit stress tests. The first action we're going to do is run a SQL query that's going to get us the global ID that we need. And the ID we need is going to be this ID here is going to be substituted with, well, we're going to take it off the form. We want the select workflow. So I'm going to copy that. Select workflow value. So this should give us a global ID that we can use to run, and the results then we're going to store in global ID. And so now we have that. By the way, if I haven't said it clearly yet, we're going to change this select workflow, the workflows to return the global ID instead of this integer ID so that we don't have to go through that step. But so by the time you're following along with this, you may not need to do this step. The value, the select workflow value should likely have the global ID already. But in any case, I'm going to get global ID. And so now we want to run, this is the part where we're ready to submit, create a record in our system debug entry, and then submit a bunch of tests. So let's dig in and do that. So we want to create a new system debug entry record, and to keep me on track, I'm going to find this so I can do a little copy and paste development. So the name of what we're going to do is stress test. We'll always put those words in front, and then we want the select workflow text. So that'll give us the text of what we're doing. We're also going to pass in the note, the details. We'll leave large details blank. We're going to start the date, start time, and the end time equal to the current date in ISO format. The quantity is this. Oh, nope, don't want to clone it. I want to copy it. Is quantity to queue. We have none that are finished yet. And the output record is going to be system debug record ID. I am going to just test that much, so I'm going to add an AJAX entry into this. So let's see what we get. If I select a workflow, my stress test, and I'm say I want to do 10 and it's test only, and submit, it seemed like it did something. So let's go to our system debug entries, which we should have open anyway. And now we can see we have this record. It's at the beginning of what we're going to do. We have a stress test recorded, the name of what we're testing, and the start time, end time, all. So we're populating this. So that's step one. Now we need to actually run the tests. So we'll continue with our logic. Instead of doing an update AJAX, we'll continue with other steps. We're going to use an action called repeat. The repeat action will let you loop through things many times. So, and I'm going to, it requires a base token, which you can select this. I'm going to use the word repeat. So this is going to create a token for every iteration of the looping. How many times we're going to go is the quantity to queue. So this is going to do this thing 500 times, or however many times we say, it'll do the actions that we put here. The actions that we're going to do, this is where we're going to execute actions asynchronously. So we're going to run our workflow and then record that it succeeded. The way we're going to run the workflow is execute workflow action. It's the generic way to run a workflow. And the action that the workflow that we're going to run, instead of picking it off of a list, we could, pick one. See, the list is here. By the way, Bogdan, this looks like the same list, so this might be a something that we need to look at before we start changing that other data source. But anyway, this is where we do global ID, the ID that we got in that first step with the SQL. So we're going to run the workflow by ID. We already know we can't have any inputs to this because every one is going to be different. And we really don't care about the outputs. We could if we wanted to record them, but in our case, we're not. We're just trying to run the workflow so we can test it out. The other thing that we're going to do is to do and I'm just going to export this for the interest of time and import it, and then we'll explain it. So we want to update the completion count, and so we're going to run an update against that, our system debug entry, and we're going to set the end time. Whichever one finishes, we're going to set the end time equal to the current UTC date. We're going to increment the quantity finished count to by one. And then in our large details, we're going to store something, the which iteration finished. And so, and we're only going to do that for the ID that we're currently working on. So we have our system debug record ID is going into the ID. So all of these, as they finish, are going to update our record. And then the iteration, the value that gets appended onto large details, is coming from the special token repeat current loop number. I don't want to skip past that. When we do a repeat action, it creates whatever your base token name is, current loop number. So you can get, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 base. That's the base token name. So repeat current loop number. So this is going to give us this is going to be updating our record for us as the work happens. All right. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we don't want to. Oh, this is important. We also need to update all tokens in the original context. We want that loop number to be kept. It's a kind of an esoteric thing. So pick this context behavior for your repeater. And then we're going to display an error message to just on screen say that the stress test was submitted. All right, that's the steps. Let's see if it works correctly. If I pick my workflow and say that I want to do it 10 times and say it's the first test, we can hit submit. We get our message. And if we look back on our system debug entries, we can see that we have now this third item, first test. It took 1 second to do, and we had 10 entries. And if we can confirm that things really ran by looking at our details. So we can see all of our numbers, again, not in order, but we can see that those things ran that many times. So here we are 55 minutes in, and we can finally do a test, and then we'll get to all the fun performance improvement stuff. And I'll just give you the heads up. I'm going to go till it's done. If you can't stay with us for the hour, you can watch it in replay. So let's do another. Well, there's one more thing. There's a change here I'm going to make on our listing. I want this to automatically refresh so that we can watch it at work. So we'll choose auto and 2 seconds. And now as things are being submitted, we can watch them appear. So let's try this with a more significant test. I'm going to do 5,000 times, and I'm just going to let it be that. So we'll submit that. So it's submitting 5,000 times of this, very simple workflow. And so now we see it appear here automatically because we're refreshing automatically. And we can see it begin to work. And so we're at 340 iterations. And let's talk about where we're going next so we can test that out. This is taking longer than I thought, so maybe we won't be doing. We can't stop it. We submitted 5,000 of those things. Maybe I really only want to test maybe 500. So we'll do this again so we can get a baseline timing. Um, so now we want to, once we get a nice baseline timing, we're going to want to improve our workflow and then try and find some benefit. So I am going to do, well, our workflow that we're stress testing is this one. In order to stress test this in a little different way, I am going to create a new token of that workflow. So this is going to be I'm going to create a stress test token, and the value is going to be user, I'll just call it users. Going to run our workflow to do that. And that's it. And so when the output that we're taking is the user CSV. And so we're running our same workflow, getting our same result, but it's doing it by way of a token. And so now we have a token called stress test users. For workflows, bear with me, I'm going to create a new workflow. This is going to be called stress test by users token. And we still have no inputs. We aren't going to have any processing going on, but we are going to do user CSV and use our token to do that. So this workflow, I'm doing this so that we can make it testable, right? A workflow is testable with the mechanism we've put in place. It's going to run this other workflow by way of a token. So we're going to find out how long it takes to do this. So let's save and test that. We run it and we get the user list. It's doing what it's supposed to do. Now let's stress test it. So we go back to our form. We'll submit it. Let's make sure this other one finished up. Yeah, we got our 5,000. It took 3 minutes, so we don't really want to wait around for that long. But now we can run our version by stress test by users by token, and we'll do it 500 times. Should be much easier to do. And so we'll submit that and watch it. There it is. So it's 500 times. It's going to take there, it finished 500 times, took 24 seconds. So this is something we can work with. So now let's see if we can, so we've demonstrated we're doing this by way of the token. Let's see if we can improve performance. Okay, here's how I'm going to improve performance. I'm going to go back to my tokens. I'm going to create in our stress test, I'm going to create a copy of this that is going to be cached. And so we'll clone the token. It's still going to be call it users cached. And it's doing the same workflow, doing the same output. Uh,
There's a small glitch. You have to refresh. Save and refresh because
Thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and cache this for 5 minutes. So we'll save and refresh. And thank you for that. So we have our cached token that we can edit and select the workflow, right? Oh, you have to pick a different value to get it to drop down. Okay, so we're running oh, uh, we want yep, we want the same one, user CSV output and cache for 300 seconds. It still gives us the output. Um, but now we have a token that's cached that yeah, a token that's cached. And so now we'll be using this for our output. So making it testable as a workflow, we're going to clone. Where is that? Duplicate. We'll create a workflow by user's token cached. So that's its name. And for the output, we're going to use this other token. Still works, still gives us the output that we need. So now we can test this cached version. All right. We did 500 before on the other one. We'll do apples and apples. We'll do 500 for this one. So we have our workflow by user's token cached. We'll do 500. We'll ask the question. So submit that and let's see what we get. So it ran 500 times in 1 second instead of 24 seconds. So there's a definite performance improvement that can be done here. And we can see it still, we've got all of our iterations. It did run. So doing it by token, doing it by cached token was way better than doing it by uh, a token that caused the SQL to run 500 times. So we've saved a lot of work on the SQL server. We saved a lot. And, um, for a final, what can we do with this? If we go back into our user selection form and use this token instead of, this is how we improve the performance of our form. Instead of doing the SQL query, we can change this to an items type. And instead of hard coding the items, we can use our token. It's still going to give us the result we want, but it's coming from a cache token that is very fast. So now if you had 100 users showing up at your page at the same time, the first user is going to that the first access to the token is going to cause it to be generated. The other 499 people are going to get served by the cached token. And so long as you have a list that is cacheable, in this case, a user list doesn't change very often, you can significantly improve the performance of the form just by using a different token. All right, so this is a great place to ask if there's any questions because we're kind of at the top of the hour. I'm going to talk about a couple more things to think about for performance purposes. But to just kind of if you have questions, great time to uh, think about that. I'm going to skip. Um, we took a look at our debug entries. We've made some variations and compared the outcomes of each different approach. When I did this in testing, I created a no-op workflow as well, just to see what the cost of calling a workflow that did nothing the same number of iterations of times. So that might be a baseline that you can pull out of your testing if you're testing a large number of workflow. Um, there is a question about cache clearing of cache, which is a great question to ask, and especially because we have an answer. I'm just going to demonstrate it here. I'm not actually going to change this workflow, but there is, if you look in the under the keyword cache, there is a clear cache item and a clear user cache. Clear cache item, there is a way to clear everything. And so if you do this, all cache gets cleared at that particular moment. The other one, clear, there's also, I'm sorry, clear cache item also you can do a particular cache key. Um, we've talked about this in Low Code Campfire recently. I'll be talking about it again on Friday, but there is a way to find out what the key is that you need to clear, and then you can clear it on your own. Um, good question. So, kind of wrapping up, this gives you the ability to run a workflow, find out how long it takes. We've been dealing recently with clients that had workflows they're very complex things that maybe take um, 5 seconds or 10 seconds to run. And then when you're trying to run, if you got 10 users that happen to bump into the same thing at the same time, then they were clashing. So this kind of stress testing lets you find the clashes, and then also meaning um, right, if you get an error count, if not all of them finish, you submit 500, but you get 495 back. Those clashes may have prevented certain ones from erroring. So at least you have a way to try to find where things error under load, or that they take too long to run. You try different approaches to see if you can get the time down. I see a question. Whoop. Yeah, question got answered offline. Um, and so, yeah, what else? Here I mentioned we could do a no-op workflow just to see the overhead. We did update the dropdown to use the cache token, so we implemented some performance improvements. And this is really the last one that I wanted to talk about. You can test any workflow that assumes no inputs or default inputs. Um, the offline question was about, in my particular case, I went towards doing a workflow token, but that's not necessary for the purpose of testing a workflow. I did it as a workflow token because I knew where I was going to go. I wanted to demonstrate that a cached token would be a performance improvement, and demonstrated that using a cache token um, would save a lot and it's an easy technique if you have relatively static data. If it needs to be up to the second, that's not a good technique, but you can test any workflow and improve any workflow using the technique. Um, so then there's kind of the standard things that you're going to encounter with when it's a SQL thing. So um, sometimes performance, when you get to the point of, okay, now I've determined something is slow, maybe it's because of SQL. Think about maybe you need to do SQL optimization. It could be that you need an index. I've cut down things that take uh, 2 minutes to run down to 10 seconds to run by adding the appropriate index. So that's something you can consider. Um, So another thing to think about is there's this, I mean, I have a nasty habit of using select star, select everything from a record set, but there might be content that you don't need. And so if you stick with naming the columns that you need specifically, that your performance might improve. And this goes particularly for listings, right? If you have a listing that has, if you do a SQL Advanced Query and you select a lot of fields, even if you don't display them, they're part of the data that's going back and forth to the browser. So you can do things in low code um, that impact performance. So you have to be very careful when you're developing something uh, for yourself with no load and 10 records in the table that works very well, and then you roll it out into production with hundreds of users and hundreds of thousands of records, doesn't perform well. You might have to rethink, do I need indexes? Do I need all of this data, all the columns? Maybe you need to apply a filter better in the record set. If you There's other performance things. If you can use SQL query versus SQL Advanced Query, you get performance improvements on that. So but there's different things you can try, and this makes it testable. All right. We will continue the discussion in the Low Code Campfire 2 days from now, 10 o'clock Central Time. So if you have interest, please drop in particular use cases. Um, and we're going to talk about the cache tools. The ability now. The Campfire has the ability. There's a contribution that shows what's in your cache and what's the impact on cache for doing the things that you've done. So all that'll be on Friday at 10 o'clock. Um, and Yeah, we'll take on any questions there and uh, hopefully continue that discussion. Hope you found the spending the hour with us valuable. We will do it again at the end of August, and please do join us for Campfire in 2 days. See you then.